apocalyptic literature. Hey guys, welcome back tonight for our final session of Playing with Fire. This isn't really the last session. I want to do another one where we're going to answer some questions, but this is the last session where we talk about the genres that we find in Scripture. And tonight, we want to talk about apocalyptic literature. Now, it's a little bit different, and it's a category that's unique to the Scriptures themselves. You're really not going to find this anywhere else. The only other place you might find it is in those books that are scripture, but they're not canonical scripture, right? They're the books that were written like the Apocrypha and the different Gospels and the Gnostics, and there was a bunch of books that were actually entitled the Apocalypse of John, the Apocalypse of Peter, the Apocalypse of Abraham, the Aramaic apocalyptic times, right? There's a bunch of that kind of literature out there, but it's almost always in reference to the Bible and the biblical events. All right. Now, as we talk about it, I want you to keep that in mind, because this section, this genre, this type of literature, you're not going to find anywhere else. Now, this does not mean it's a catch-all to just say, well, I don't understand it, so we're going to call it apocalyptic literature. That's not how it works. How it works is, apocalyptic literature is very symbol heavy. It is very symbolic, and that's the way they wrote. Whether it was a vision they were accurately recording, or whether it was something they couldn't put into words, and so they just gave it a symbol that they did understand and tried to explain something they were doing at the time. There's lots of different reasons why this type of literature might in fact be written the way it's written, but the overarching fact is that when we read it today, we get the big picture. We understand the overall arcing story, but we do not, and we probably won't, be able to understand the actual little individual details. That is, unless those details are interpreted for us. We see that in the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, we see a very apocalyptic literature come into its own. The prophets before him, like Joel, Zechariah, Ezekiel, and even Isaiah, right? Those were called proto-apocalyptic writings, right? There's parts of those prophecies that are definitely a different category, and you can tell what they are. You can say, this is part of a vision, this is part of something different, and he's using terms that we don't understand, that aren't really making sense, but they're there, and we get the idea behind it. And then comes Daniel. He gave us an apocalyptic vision by Nebuchadnezzar, where he saw the statue and the stone come out of heaven and crush the feet of it, and the whole statue topples. That was an apocalyptic episode. But then Daniel gives us the interpretation of how that worked. So we have a clue of how this apocalyptic literature is to work, how this apocalyptic literature is going to work. But then he gives us another whole section where he has another vision. He gives us his diatribe, and we're told that it's a message from the angel Gabriel as he lays out his story, and then he goes on to very interesting symbolism and talks about these things. And it's not because we don't understand it, or he didn't understand it, it's because maybe we're not supposed to understand it. Maybe it is things that are too wonderful for us that couldn't be put into human words. It's all those ideas are possible. And then we have, further on in the Bible, we come to the end of the New Testament, and we see the apocalyptic book of them all, which is the Revelation. In fact, it's called the Apocalypse of John, and the term Revelation is a translation of the word apocalypse. That's where we get all our pictures of apocalyptic episodes from, like all those zombie movies, end of the world type events, the post-apocalyptic worlds, like the movie The Road, or living Mad Max style, right? That's where we get a lot of that imagery. In fact, you can see a lot of imagery from horror stories or science fiction, whatever else that you want to see, and a lot of those images are straight up Bible. They come out of the Bible, namely from Revelation, mostly from Revelation, but also from the other stuff that goes on. And it's a incredible study. And that's what apocalyptic literature does. It gives us a symbol, it gives us an idea, it gives us a goal to reach for, although we might not understand all the details. And that's why there's a promise given at the end of the book of Revelation. Some people interpret it as being a promise to read the whole entire book of Revelation. And that would be true. Some people also interpret it to read the whole Bible, because this was the last book of the Bible. And everybody knew that when this was written, this was the end cap to the Bible. So at the very end of the book of Revelation, there's a promise given. It says there will be blessing bestowed on anybody who reads this book, or the book of this Revelation. So it could refer to the Bible as a whole, or it could refer to just the book of Revelation. We don't know, because that's the nature of apocalyptic literature. The thing I want you to take away from tonight is we can read it, and we can understand the larger story. We can understand the goals behind it. But we may not always understand the details and how it plays out, unless it's interpreted for you in the scriptures. That's the important part. So when you read things like the older prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah and Joel, we're given the interpretations of those apocalyptic episodes. We're given the interpretations later on in scripture, or even within the same book. But then we have other apocalyptic episodes, like in the book of Daniel, when he talks about the end times, or the end times as given to us in Revelation, where we don't know the interpretation. We're not given many details. We're given a few, but not many, so it's really kind of give and take. We're supposed to either not know, or we're supposed to take it with a grain of salt, or we're supposed to read it and understand the big picture and look for the details and how they fit. But that's not our worry. It's not for us to stress about, because otherwise we would know. And that's what apocalyptic literature is. Apocalypse simply means the revelation of God. And this is God speaking in God talk, which is why we can't translate it into human speech. That's why it's symbols. That's why it's picture heavy. That's why we read it, and there's a reward for reading it.